So hello everybody. Welcome to you for joining today's podcast. Today we are focusing on professional services because we believe that there are many people who have no idea what we mean when we say professional services at higher education institutions. Now, within the academy, professional services comprise all the non-academic activity that take place to enable the business of teaching and research and societal impact to occur. Professional services staff support universities to function and to deliver their academic vision. They play such an important role within the academy, but much of this goes unnoticed and unappreciated. And so this is why we want to put a spotlight on professional services to show the range of careers and opportunities that are available and the work that goes on within what we call professional services. And I've got three inspiring women to help me to do that. Shall we get started then? Yeah? Okay. All right. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask each of the women to introduce themselves. And I'll ask that as they introduce themselves, they tell us what they do, which university they are from, and anything interesting about themselves that they would like us to know. I just go with the one closest to me on my screen. So I'll start with you, Louise, and that's not because you're from Leeds. It's just because you're on my screen as the first person.
Thanks so much. Thanks for the invite, and it's great to be alongside such a great panel. So my name is Louise Banahini. I'm Director of Educational Engagement and Student Success at the University of Leeds. So I have responsibility for a lot of the learning journey across higher education. And an interesting thing about me, I watch a lot of sport, and Manchester United is a particular favourite for me.
Okay, thank you. Sharon?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sharon Germaine-Cox. I'm an Assistant Vice Chancellor at the University of Bolton, mainly responsible for organisational change and org change projects. I have a background in HR. I've been previously the HR Director at this university, and I am also responsible for Managing Director of two subsidiaries and another director of another subsidiary of the university as well. So on a day-to-day basis, I can be involved in security services. I can be involved in securing agency workers because we run an agency, and we also run a learner support subsidiary as well, which supplies specialist learner supports to one of our group members, which is a college as well. So the University of Bolton is a group structure where we've got a college, we've got an academy, we've got an outward bound centre, we've got an apprenticeship centre and a number of other subsidiaries as well. So it's not just the university, it's a wider group. And the idea of the vision behind the university is to have something for everybody wherever they are in their careers and to have those progression routes, because we're very much based in the community, supporting the community.
Okay. And what's that interesting thing about yourself that you like us to know?
Oh, the interesting thing about myself is not just that I'm a Liverpool supporter, but I actually, in my spare time, like to go to a lot of live events, whether that be the theatre, whether it be comedy shows or music. And I've got a really eclectic taste in music. So, for instance, the weekend before last, I was shaking hands with Martin Fry from ABC at an intimate one-to-one. So I like to do things like that because now I'm showing my age. 80s and 90s is my kind of era, and so I've chased my childhood sort of heroes in music or comedy, and that's what I spend my spare time doing. And the main point is so you can relax and re-engage with family and friends, because sometimes being in this sector can be quite stressful if you let it be. But to stay grounded, it's always good to have the soul of music or the laughter of comedy, and it brings you right back to a really relaxed space and really supports your well-being.
Thank you, Sharon. And we will have time to talk about the stresses and strategies to overcome those later on. Melanie?
Thanks, Sally. It's so good to hear from colleagues as well, some of their own interests. I can already feel myself connecting with you both on different things there. So my name's Melanie, or you can call me Mel. I am the Director for Education Development at Birmingham City University. And that just means I work very closely with our Pro-Vice Chancellor for Education and our deans across the different schools and faculties to make sure that our teaching, our learning and our education and student success is where we want it to be. Something interesting about myself, I think what people tend to find interesting about me is that I lived in the Caribbean for 15 years and I got all of my qualifications and started my work experience out there. And then I came back to the UK,
Okay.
particularly in Trinidad. I was in Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay, that's good to know. Right, so we'll get down right to the questions. The first one I have is to just give us a sense of your career journey. So if you can try and summarize years of work in 2 minutes, then that would be great. Can I start with you, Sharon, and then I'll come to you, Melanie, and then Louise.
Okay, so I won't start up from my aspirations to be a footballer because that will take centuries. I was born in the wrong decades, I think, so I had to find something else to do. So I decided my parents wanted me to go and do a degree, any degree, they didn't care, wanted one of their children, now child number 5, to go to university. So I took biochemistry because I liked science. And from then, I didn't actually use my biochemistry degree. I went into quality management, working for Philips Electronics, and long story. And then entered training and development and quality in the private sector. That landed me straight into further education at a time of massive change. Then I went to become work in the food industry as a quality and training manager. And as a result of that, ended up doing a HR interim role to help the company out. And that started my new career trajectory, which I would never envisaged in HR. And then that led me to working in a biotechnology company, doing clinical research and in anti-wound healing. And then from there, I ended up in the HE for the first time. And from there, I went into FE. And then from there, I went into the NHS and then returned back to HE as an AVC. So I also deputised for the Vice Chancellor as well, in terms of what I really enjoy doing is in conferring degrees, because it's the journey of people that you really want to know, and the type of students we support and get degrees is always a pleasure when you see the families and the journey they've been through. So, and one of the current projects I'm working on is a national aspiring VC development program, which we just launched for people from minority groups who, to learn the inside track of what they need to do in addition to the technical stuff to become vice chancellors. And so that's led on quite a few interesting journeys. So basically that's it in a nutshell. Very 2 minutes. I could go on a little bit longer, but I will keep it brief. But unexpected was what I would say, because I don't think I planned ever in my long career sort of list of things to do. HR wasn't into it, and certainly not a managing director of 2 subsidiaries either. So that's me.
And I wanted to follow up with that and ask, so what brought you back to higher education? Because you've worked in so many different sectors.
Well, basically, an opportunity came up to actually do something different, and setting up subsidiaries are new to me. So I wanted to do, that's what attracted me back to this particular institution. And I suppose, when I worked in FE, I was still in HE because we had HE provision as well. But I just wanted to do something that I can enhance both my quality skills, my sort of leadership skills, and my HR skills all rolled into one. And it's been really exciting setting up those companies, which we've done over the past 2 or 3 years. So, and being responsible for it, all the governance structures, etc. It's been a real blast. I really enjoy it. And I think what I would always say is, and this is what my mum and dad used to say, when an opportunity comes, however frightening it feels at the time, just go for it. Because often you think about the failure, but I always think about the journey and the learning. Because you always, from all the jobs I've ever done, I've always had a moment thinking, I've never done that before. But they've asked me to do it, so I must be able to do it. So I will do it. I'll find a way. And I think that's been the philosophy. So I always say to people, don't let the voices in your head stop you trying to do something different, because I think the excitement of it all and the research skills you've got and learnt along the way will get you to where you need to be. And I've been well supported through my career journey, unexpectedly in some cases, to do something different. And that's what brought me back to HE.
Excellent. Melanie?
Okay, so my career journey, well, I'll say technically it started while I was in Trinidad. I began working as a research assistant in the university. So while I work in professional services, my role actually is one of those unique ones that straddles both academic and professional services work. So I started out as a research assistant in the School of Education at the university that I had graduated from. And then I went into teaching in schools. So I was working with SEND kids in schools, and I actually really loved that. But I also realized that it wasn't my calling. So I ended up transitioning back into higher education as a researcher, and then I became a teacher. And I think this is where the education development started for me. I was working in a faculty with some really expert educators, but they weren't capable of translating their knowledge very effectively into good pedagogic practice, one, or into various modes of learning. So at the time we were starting out with online learning and using online and LMS to start teaching online and distance learning. And so I basically did that for the whole faculty, even though, like you said, Sharon, it wasn't my job and it's not something that I'd really ever done before, but it was an opportunity and I was pretty okay with it. And I actually really enjoyed it. And I've always enjoyed curriculum design, and that was what my master's was in. So I was able to then kind of support the whole faculty to get our programs online, which was massive for income generation, as well as for the reach of the university. And the way that the Caribbean is set up, it's lots of small islands with a few bigger islands that have universities. So you have to be able to have a massive reach. So that kind of started the education development piece for me. And then I just kind of progressed. I looked for gaps in what was happening in the department and observed the gaps that were happening with our students and their students' needs. And I just started to fill those gaps. And you know, I've also had some great opportunities that I capitalized on. So roles that I probably was underqualified for that I applied for and got. And so I just kind of progressed in my career, and I had to move back to the UK because of personal issues. And so, you know, those of you who've lived and worked overseas know that when you come back, it's almost like you always can guarantee that you're going to get a demotion in some ways. And that was a bit challenging, and it was a bit panicking because also all of my qualifications were either US or Trinidadian qualifications. So I was a bit nervous about what would happen. But again, I've met some amazing people on my career journey who really saw the value in what I could bring to the organisation and decided to make space for me and to platform me. And when I took those opportunities, like as was said earlier, I just did it. I just tried my best and I did it, and I did it to the best of my ability. And I didn't do too bad. And so I've moved around quite a bit. I lived and worked in quite a few universities in London, and then moved back up to the Midlands, and just kept progressing. I guess I told myself quite early on, I'm not going to go for the same job. If I'm moving, I'm going for a job that's either paying me more or is a step up both step up in terms of role and paying me more. And so I've been fortunate that those opportunities have presented themselves and I capitalized on them. And so here we are today. I think one thing that I will also emphasize was it was a really interesting transition back to the UK from the Caribbean, because even though my master's and PhD was in curriculum design and development, it was focused on post-colonial education. And so I had a lot of learning while I was out there, first-hand learning from some really great decolonial, post-colonial practitioners and researchers. And I didn't realize at the time how important that was going to be for when I came back to the UK. And so when I came back and I was adjusting to the culture and readjusting to the culture and adjusting as an adult, because I left as a teenager, it was a challenge. But then, you know, the conversations around decoloniality started to spike up, and the conversations around racism and racialized barriers for people in higher education. And I was able to contribute to those conversations because of that education that I've had. And in some ways that kept me on the trajectory that I was on, but it kind of made me a bit more of an expert when talking about certain types of pedagogic practice or institutional structures that present barriers for people of colour or oppressed peoples. So that's an important part of, I think, of my journey, because it kind of defines who I am now as a practitioner, as well as a professional service advocate.
Okay. I want to pick up on the point you made earlier about straddling the academic and then professional services. And I wonder if you can say a bit more about how that works out, how that feels like, because you don't have a lot of people who who do both. So just
Yeah.
a bit of insight about how that works out.
But I think it's because of the nature of the field that I'm in. So it's education, right? My whole practice, my qualifications were in pedagogic practice and how to teach. And a lot of people don't realize that that is a discipline in and of itself. You know, universities have higher education qualifications, but in the UK, they're very much focused on developing staff who are coming in with a subject specialism. And so my teams and my roles have always been, we have to know how to speak to and work with academics about developing their academic practice, which means you also have to have a level of credibility with that, because you also have to be able to speak academic, but also it is an academic field. You're publishing, you're reading, you're constantly upskilling yourself on how to be a better pedagogic practitioner, and then how to support others. You're always trying to stay ahead of the curve. You know, when COVID was coming around, we had to teach the whole university how to teach online. So it's one of those interesting disciplines that is a discipline in and of itself, but doesn't really get a lot of focus in UK higher education as a discipline. But it's actually really crucial, because we know that if you come in with a PhD, that doesn't necessarily mean you know how to teach the subject. It just means you're an expert in that topic.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you. Louise.
Hi, yeah, it's great listening to Sharon and Melanie. So I'll start with the present day. So within my role, it's very much about pedagogical enhancement, about high quality inclusive learning, and then also strategies that underpin that, so that we can ensure that we can develop those pipelines for students to come into higher education at any level, and thinking particularly at the gaps. And I think the reason why that's important is because I think my career journey has been on a trajectory towards that anyway. And I've worked in higher education for most of my career. At the start of my I suppose my journey from graduation, I taught English as a foreign language, and a bit like Melanie, I really enjoyed it, but I constantly had this thought about how I could influence at a greater scale. So I enjoyed it, but I could see the gaps, I could see the issues, and for me particularly, one of the points that really resonated with me was that I was teaching in Greece actually, and there were students who were coming to Greece new to the country. They didn't speak the language, and there was just simply in the area that I was in, there was no provision, so you just had to learn the language whilst learning at the same time. And so for me, I was constantly sort of faced with this concern about how you could possibly fill the gap there and how you could support those students. And that's really the way in which my career journey has progressed, in that for me, what's always been really important is how you can balance that really high quality learning whilst ensuring there's an equitable approach to being able to access this and to be able to succeed within it. So like Sharon, as I've progressed through my career, there's been either opportunities that I've identified. So I've seen that there's a gap in the way in which institutionally or sectorally we think about those areas, and about pedagogical enhancement, or about equity of access, or student success. And I've put forward a proposal as how we move it forward, and that's been positively received. All the opportunities have been presented to me, and I've taken that opportunity. And like Sharon has said, I've always felt that I should work on that and make sure that I can make it a success. It's been really important to me, and it does always come back to me for about the students and about the future of society, really, in terms of making a difference within that. And I think that it's particularly shaped by my own lived experience. And for me, what's always really very front and centre for me is that my father was an immigrant to the country, so he came from Ghana, and he was incredibly intelligent, but he didn't have the opportunities to be able to get the job and to get the education that he wanted or expected when he came to the UK, to be brutally honest. And he worked incredibly hard, and he didn't complain about that, but there was always a sense of injustice for me, and it's always been something that I want to make that difference for future generations. And the work that I do, I can see the impact of it through the teams that I lead. at an immediate level, but I also it's really important to me to think about those future generations. And then within that, I, like Melanie was saying, I really straddle the academic and the professional services side of things. And for me, I think that's a really important space to be in. Like Melanie was saying, I think really recognising the strengths that come from that and the way in which you can bring a huge amount of benefit and a huge amount of expertise, both for the academic community and the professional services community, and the way in which creating that pathway and recognising the value of third space academics is particularly important to me.
Okay. I want to pick up on that and ask, what have you found most challenging working within that space, working with academics and then professional services? I know we can spend the whole day on that, but you know.
That's a really good question. I think at the heart of it is probably trust. I think that sometimes if colleagues are in that third space academia, sometimes they don't trust themselves and their own expertise and knowledge and experience. I think sometimes there is a concern that others won't trust them, and I think that is the case, just in terms of leadership, full stop, that you really have to be able to ensure that you can nurture a positive culture, you can empower colleagues to be able to trust their own experience, and be able to show through strategies and through policies the value that we can all bring through collaborating and bringing our own perspectives. Part of that is also about building diverse teams. In whatever way that is, there's great strength in that.
Okay, so listening to all three of you, what's coming to me is the fact that some of the opportunities you've had in your career, some have been planned, some have been unplanned, but I've been writing a few things down. So one of them was from you, Melanie, when you said you look for the gaps and you fill those gaps just to give yourself that competitive edge, isn't it? And then Sharon, you also talked about when an opportunity presents itself, then you just go for it. And there was something that you really said that really resonated with me. The fact that you said, don't let the voices in your head stop you. So I'm trying to write down all these sound bites, and by the time we finish, hopefully we'll have like so many to share with those who will be watching the recording later on. Okay, so a question to all three of you. If you had to start your career journey afresh, what would you do differently? Or if there's anything you would do differently. And then you explain why. So any of you can start.
I would, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, if I was starting afresh and it was now and in the present, I think that there are so many more opportunities than there were when I was starting my career. So I would take the advice that I give to a lot of colleagues that I work with who are starting afresh, which is looking at what's out there, building those networks, taking opportunities like this and connecting with colleagues and hearing from those who are working on it and learning alongside others, because it can feel very isolating to go along your journey, but meeting people who have similar experiences and like-minded aspirations can really help with that, to work together and to learn together.
Okay, Sharon, do you want to come in?
Yes, I was going to say something a little bit similar, because, but also sort of one of the things that I think is really impactful is recognizing you can't do it on your own. And if I was to start again, I wish I'd had a coach earlier on in my career. And the reason why a coach can help, because and I think this is something particularly I found with women who I've coached, is that there's often a strong sense of imposter syndrome. And what you're trying to do is to have that challenged, to say, why do you feel like it's an imposter syndrome? Why don't you feel you deserve this opportunity? And I think if I'd had it early in my career, I might have taken more risks, rather than saying, I need to sort of risk manage everything. So I find that's really important. And as a result of my experience, and often I found myself to be the first of everything, you know, whether it be at school, whether it be in FE, whether it be in a university setting, the first female Black person, and it's not something that I was really conscious of until I reflect upon it. But being the first, it carries a lot of responsibility. So having a coach, I think, is really important. And that's why in my professional life, I often coach people who I find in their early careers so that they can accelerate through the career challenges that I possibly found, because I think it's really important to give back. So I think having a coach who is a critical friend, but actually gets you to think and develop from within is really important, as well as the networks as well, because even within the networks, it can feel quite lonely unless it's a secure place and psychologically safe. But having that coach who's there for you, I think is really important. And that's what I would have done differently, I think, had I had my time again. Other than that, I think most of my journey has been a learning journey. My dad always used to say the learning never stops. This is when I was 4 years old and I didn't want to go back to school after the first day, thinking I've done it all. My siblings had taught me how to read. I knew it all at 4 years old. Imagine what a horror I was. And then he said the learning never stops. Therefore, you've got to continue. And that's always stayed with me, and something I always say to people, whether we like it or not, every opportunity, whether it's a positive or a negative experience you have from it, there's always a learning point. And if you take the learning, it actually makes you feel better about things because you can do something. You're not powerless. So that's what I would do differently.
Thank you. Melanie?
It's actually interesting that we've all kind of said the same thing. I was going to say a mentor specifically, not quite a coach, but yeah, I think my career, I knew I was going to be a teacher. I didn't know where I was going to teach and what age or how, but I always knew I was going to be some sort of a teacher just because of the way that I was raised and my personality. I think it just fits really well in there. But in terms of what would I have done differently, I definitely would have had a mentor earlier on. And I think that having the mentor earlier on would have been important for me, particularly because of my personality. I am very confident and I am also very clear about what I want to achieve, and I want to do it that way and I want to do it by that time. And that's good because I tend to achieve those goals. But it also becomes very problematic when you don't achieve the goal and you don't really understand why. And a mentor, oftentimes, because I have one now, is the person who gives you some of the insights into why you might not, but also provides a sense of validation when it's not you. And so, yeah, I think I would echo the sentiments of colleagues that I would have had a mentor earlier on in my career to help guide the direction rather than kind of figuring it out. But I think I've done pretty all right.
I've done pretty all right. More than all right. A reminder to our listeners that you can pop your questions in the chat as we go. And then in about 10, 12 minutes, I'll just open the floor for any questions from you. Another question to all of you. If you were to describe your leadership journey in one word, what would that word be and why?
Well, my word is really straightforward. It's nosy. And people say, what do you mean by nosy? And it goes back to, what I mean is curious. Because what I found, whatever strategy, policy you have in place, procedures, what actually makes things work is how you interact with colleagues. And so being a nosy leader, whether people I'm leading as line management and leadership in terms of my accountability, or leading a project or a team, the critical thing is knowing the skills and the personality and the challenges facing each individual enables you to approach them in a very personalized and professional way to get the best out of them. And I find, and the challenge becomes even greater the more people you have in that leadership chain. And so I like to invest a lot of time in being curious about individuals, finding out what their favorite football team is, favorite food, whether they've got pets, how invested they have, and so forth, because it enables me to have empathy for some of the challenges facing and actually get the best out of them. I don't know how you can manage and lead without actually knowing a lot about who is in your team, who's in the camp, what skills they have, the things they like, the things they don't like, and playing to people's strengths. Because when, particularly in the sector, we're facing lots of challenges. When you have those challenges, you've got to forget about job titles and think about where's the skills in my organisation, in my own team, to deliver this strategy. Because otherwise it stays on a piece of paper. And I did say from the beginning, one lesson I did learn is you can't do things on your own. It's not about me, it's about us. And particularly in higher education, where collaboration is really important. So finding the authentic people and who their true authentic selves is a really important journey, but you can't do that without developing trust. And one thing I've learned, it's an easier space to be in when you say to somebody, you have my trust from day one, and it's for you to lose it. You get more out of it rather than be distrustful of people. I found to turn it around, that's a lesson I learned some years ago, but it's worked for me. I've never been let down on many occasions by having that approach. So that's what I say, nosy is my leadership style. But obviously we can talk about other leadership styles, democratic and that sort of thing. But I find that nosiness, that concept of the nosiness, curiosity, actually gets you further.
Interesting. Louise?
Yeah, I really like that one. I was going to say service, so service leadership. And by that, I think it's really important for me that I empower others and I support colleagues to be able to enable that collaboration. So that includes being able to communicate clearly what the strategy is and what we need to do. But also, in some cases, being able to articulate that problem, but and identify it, but actually be able to trust others to solve it. So really understanding the capabilities and the strengths of teams and how colleagues can work together to be able to address an agenda.
So both of you have talked about recognizing the capabilities of team members. And I know that Dustin has put in the chat that it's titles matter too much in systems. So it's just resonating with what the two of you have said. Melanie?
I was going to say servant leadership, but it's just the same thing that colleagues have said. Essentially, my dad is a pastor, and so I grew up with the Bible, and so a lot of the influences of that are still present with me today. But servant leadership is important to me, and it's important, and I think it's a great kind of, in some ways, it's almost in some people's perceptions a bit of an oxymoron, because how can you lead, which requires at times for you to make decisions, it requires at times for you to make difficult decisions about people, about the work, about deadlines and things like that, but it also requires you to care about people and to know who they are and to want to support them, and I think that encapsulates my personality, but also my approach to leadership as best as I could think about it, because I care about people. And it was quite early on in my leadership journey that we did a whole HR training once, and that was where it kind of hit home for me that what you think might be happening with someone may not be happening with them. Someone showing up late for work doesn't automatically mean that they are delinquent and that they're just someone who's late for work. There could be serious issues going on at home that are affecting that. Similarly, somebody, who's doing a role but isn't entirely doing the role, it just may be that role's not right for them, or it may be that they just need some sort of incentive that you can offer them at work that's not quite their role, but is something that will incentivize them. So I'm really passionate about finding out who people are and allowing them as much as possible to bring themselves to work, because I know what it feels like when you can't. But similarly, I am very task oriented. So I want to make sure that we do the job and we do it well and that we do it clearly. I want to make sure that everyone's on board and that we're moving in the same direction. And I want to make sure that as a team, we can work together, which sometimes means you have to address individuals and individual working and not just thinking about it as a collective. So I would say servant leadership is my style.
Okay, thank you. I've seen a question come through the chat from Tola, and she's asking the difference between a mentor and a coach, and the strengths and limitations of each. So if any of you would like to pick this question up, and I do encourage that you keep your questions coming in.
Okay, the difference between a mentor and a coach is a mentor is somebody who's what we call an old sage, has done it before. So has had the experiences, sat in your chair, and can actually draw from their experiences and actually add to the conversation. Okay, so to help you develop because they've been there. A coach is more into making you realize the potential from yourself and asking a coaching question. So the coach actually doesn't have to be from your discipline, just has to be practiced in the skill and art of actually trying to get you to actually realize what is going on in a particular scenario, and for you then to decide whether you're going to do something about it. So they're not going to offer saying, I've done this before, this is, you could try this. They're going to get you to do the work yourself and actually ask you sometimes what can be quite upsetting questions, not with the intention, because you suddenly realize something's going on which you weren't aware with. So it's raising awareness of some of your development needs, making you make decisions about whether you want to make those needs or not, and then moving the agenda forward in terms of then challenging you in terms of that conversation. So it really brings out all about you working on yourself and bringing out those developmental needs and doing something about it. So whether it's improving your communication skills because you're clashing with a certain personality, and you haven't realized that actually the reason why you're clashing is X, Y, and Z. It's really making you think about something. Whereas a mentor more or less sort of say, I could, have you considered this? And I've done something like this beforehand. So the mentorship is actually feeding you more information, whereas coaching is more about self-direction, rather than being directed effectively. So that's the difference between the two approaches. And I have done both, and I often ask people who I'm in that relationship with to say, do you want to have a mentor or do you want to have a coach? Because I'll take a slightly different approach according to how I'm doing it, if that makes sense.
Okay. Would any one of you want to add up to what Sharon has said? Yes, please.
I was just going to add, I suppose, just another role really, which is about sponsorship or advocacy, where so mentorship and coaching are both really valuable, as Sharon was describing. I think sometimes what we need is also sponsorship or advocacy, which is where it may not be that you need that guidance or those searching questions. You really just need to know how to unlock the journey that you want to get to. So I have been a sponsor for PhD students who are really thinking about their next step and how they can get onto that early career researcher path. And it's been the opportunity of working is really for me to help unlock those networks and help identify those opportunities. And so I think that's another really important way in which you can advance your career alongside mentorship or coaching.
Thank you. Melanie, was there something else you wanted to add?
It was just to say, absolutely agree with all of those definitions of different roles that could be extremely valuable to your career. But it was just to say also, if you're really strategic, you might be able to find someone who can afford you all three of those in one person. And it may not be that you get, an expert coach or an expert mentor, but it might be that you can get all of those. So I can speak about my mentors. They have been in large part all three of those. And again, it's probably not due to me picking them, it's just them being amazing people. But there has been an element of unlocking and because they're in those positions that I wanted to be in or want to be in, so they have the access. So they were able to unlock or make suggestions about kind of forums or events or things that I should and shouldn't be doing. And that in and of itself offers a sense of directive mentorship. But then also when I'm talking to them about my own experiences or things that I'm struggling with at work or want to be able to achieve, they do sometimes pick up on either my communication style or my approach to project management. So sometimes if you could be strategic, you might be able to find someone who can afford you all three of those, or even just two of those in that one person.
Excellent. There's another question in the chat. How would you encourage the younger generation into academia? I know this is a pipeline question. Louise, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I could start. So yeah, this is an area I feel really passionate about. So I mean, right at the heart of it, we have to make sure that we've got diverse groups of students coming into higher education in the first place. and that we can eliminate awarding gaps. But beyond that, also thinking about that pipeline into PhD study in terms of the funding and being able to access a supervisor. But if we are able to secure that and get students onto that PhD journey, I think in terms of encouraging into academia, I think it's really that creating those networks and space so that colleagues can see people who look like them, people who are doing similar roles that are a little bit further on. It goes back to that mentorship and sponsorship. And also looking at some of the barriers to it. I think that when we have a model where there are short-term contracts and some of that job insecurity, that can be a big leap for many of us. And so really thinking about what we do at a systemic level, as well as being able to provide that support so that if people are doing it, it doesn't feel like an isolating experience is really important. But yeah, I think there's lots to do in that space to be able to secure that pipeline into academia.
Thank you. Sharon, did you want to come in? Or Melanie?
I just wanted to add, well, there's two angles to how do you get people into this. So there's the student angle where you want to sort of reach out to schools, and I suppose the university's mission is to do that. And what we've effectively ended up with is this automatic pipeline, because we've got a college and we have people who go across to our college to actually talk to students about higher education, because literally it's across the road. And so we offer those progression routes, and obviously they can see the diversity of the campus, because we are very quite diverse in terms of doing that. And then there's the actual angle of coming to work for a university, and therefore what we have to do is to do a day in the life of your career, and to explain the number of masterclasses I've done for students who are in HE, saying, would you fancy doing the next stage? You do a PhD, or you could come work with professional services. It's really actually having that close relationship with our student union and our student bodies and our students, and actually encourage them to think beyond going outside this the sector, to stay within the sector, do a PhD, or if they go outside the sector and develop a specialism, saying, well, would you fancy doing as part of that part-time hourly paid training to get a feel for what teaching's like, and then you can become an associate. And then, because a lot of because we're very vocational in terms of the degrees we offer, a lot of our teaching staff are also professional staff as well, so they have their own professional businesses, so it brings in both. So we try to encourage people to think beyond what the traditional models are, and try to explain the differences between the different types of institutions that fall under the umbrella of higher education. And I think explaining the sector is one of the key things. We need to market ourselves better in terms of a wider audience, to explain that not all universities are the same. Some are very research based, some are very vocational based, you know, according to how those institutions evolved in the first place. So that's what we try to do on a sort of a very local basis, and also in terms of how we're advertising jobs, etc., saying, do a taster, try create a career this way. You're not losing anything. You don't have to give up your full-time career, but you can actually try different things. And a lot of people aren't aware that there are those opportunities. And a lot of our permanent staff have come through that route as well.
So you've just answered Michelle's question, because she wanted to find out if you could do both industry and academia, and the short answer is yes, you can. Yes. Okay, there's another question here. How do you...
Ali, sorry, can I just come in on that one just really quickly as well? Sorry. I think I want to kind of go back a step and ask the question, should we be encouraging people into academia? And it feeds into something that Sharon was just talking about in terms of the different types of institutions. And this is me putting my decolonial hat on now. When you think about the way that academia was set up, that universities and higher education has been set up, when you think about the injustices that are still pervasive in higher education, when you think about the cultural backgrounds, and I'm talking particularly about people of colour now, our cultural backgrounds and our heritage, and some of the narratives that have come along with that in terms of careers and jobs, security and these types of things, I think the first question that I would like to ask colleagues to think about is, should we be encouraging everyone? And should we be encouraging certain people into academia? And then when you're encouraging people into academia, and I talk about this all the time when I'm talking to aspiring professors and people looking at promoting into positions of seniority or into positions of seniority, what are you trying to achieve? Because if you're coming in to help maintain the status quo, then I don't think you should be here, because we need things to change. So there's an element of, if you're coming in to work with our students and those students who are here, but the students who are going to be coming in, who are vastly different now each year on year, I think more so than previously, are you prepared to reflect on who you are and change who you are to facilitate that societal change that will come at the end of that 3 or 4 year degree? Or are you just coming in to teach, to talk, and to get a salary? And so that's the other side of it. Should you be here because you are actually potentially going to change someone's life or permanently affect it negatively? And that's coming from my passion piece of working in pedagogic practice and seeing both sides of the spectrum of people who really just don't care about the students and really shouldn't be in front of them, but then people who are really passionate about making sure that they provide students with a transformational educational experience. And we should only really be encouraging people who are in that latter category to go into academia, whether it's from a research focused or a teaching focused role, regardless. So I just wanted to put that out there.
It was a good question to
Yeah.
I actually agree with you that because the selection process should always be looking at people who care about students. Because if you don't care about students, it's not going to improve their experience. And our university prides ourselves on the student experience. And to do that, people have to care passionately about those students who've often been failed quite a few times in the education system before they come to us. And what we want to do is to actually break that cycle and say you can do things. And I can only speak from the perspective of my institution. And therefore, we talk to our Vice Chancellor, if somebody in a selection process doesn't mention the student experience, we're not going to employ them, because actually that's the core thing you've got to get right. They've got to have a really effective experience and then be able to progress and use that degree in any way they want to. This is where we kind of have disagreements in terms of the sector, because we know that certain people come to university, they don't necessarily go into a graduate job because of their family circumstances and so forth. But what they do is have an impact on the second generation, their children, their relatives, who then come and become doctors, nurses, and so forth, and artists and all the other degrees we actually do, which leads to employment. So it's a bigger picture than that. It's really trying to change society change. And you're absolutely right about that the people who come have got to want to change. Academia is supposed to be about challenging the status quo and the thinking based upon research, underpinned those thinking rather than people's opinions, actually testing that. So if you're not doing the academic journey, not really an academic, are you? And that's the way I kind of look at the world. So don't be an academic unless you can be a true academic and actually challenge. And society changes so much. How it was 30 years ago is totally different. And that's because people have had the conviction to say, this is not quite right. And the science is telling us this. And I would say when I talk about science, but that's why I think it's really important that what you say is absolutely correct, that we continue to actually select people who are actually going to care about those students and their journeys and their research and so forth. And I suppose I was quite lucky because, I said I did my degrees in the 1980s. Yes, I'm quite a mature lady. And I remember I took for granted the attention I got at university from my advisor of studies and the people who taught me and delivered the training, all of which were professors, etc. But I just took it for granted, and I realised, actual fact, not everybody has that experience. I had a great student experience, and I went to Scotland for 4 years and had a great time going to all those Cayleys. But anyway, that's enough about me.
Well, thank you for coming in with that very important point. And just when it was getting very interesting, we are running out of time. So we've got just barely 9 minutes. So what I'm going to do, there's a question here about how you take care of yourself. And I want to make that broader and say, if you can talk about the challenges you've had and the strategies that that have helped you to overcome those challenges, and then you can bring in, like taking care of yourself, etc. And this is to all three of you, and then we'll bring the today's session to a close.
I'll jump in on that one quickly, Sally, because I'm really passionate about mental health, and particularly mental health of Black women in academia. I am very honest and open with my own mental health struggles and journeys, and anxiety and depression are real. And I don't know about any other industry, but working in this industry has pushed me to my limits, to the point where sometimes I really have to kind of just either shut down social media. And I'm sure many of us experience that, particularly with the George Floyd and the curve of EDI that happened after that. You know, just shut down social media. Sometimes I have to say, sorry, I can't help you with that when I'm at work. Sometimes I can't engage in that conversation with you. And sometimes I'm stumbling through the day, particularly when the weather starts to look like this, because y'all know, as I said, I came from the Caribbean, so this is hard. This is really hard. But I think there's an important thing around being aware and investigating your own mental health journey. And for women particularly, that is directly affected by our hormonal changes and our cycles. So I think it's really important for you to spend time investigating the days where you are not 100%, the days or the times of the year where, you know, the seasonal depression and anxiety as well. It's really important to do your own investigation into your physical health. Take the supplements, take the vitamins, take the oils that will make you feel better, even if it's just a little bit. And then also look at the triggers at work, because there are some amazing people. And one of the things that I've had to do was to find a community. Any institution that I worked in, I would find a community of Black women so that I could be myself. Because, you know, when people say bring your whole self to work, 9 times out of 10, we can't do that. So I would find a community of Black women who I could be myself with, who I could talk to, because it is just different when I'm talking to other Black women than it is when I'm talking to anybody else at work. And these women have oftentimes become my family. Because they probably had the same experience of, they feel quite isolated, they feel like nobody else really understands or wants to talk to them about certain things. So find people, find networks, find a group of people who you can really gel with and proactively seek those people out. Investigate your own health and your own mental health, and really try to understand how anxiety, depression, seasonal anxiety, depression, and all other sorts of mental health issues that are oftentimes under the radar for women are affecting you. And then take time for yourself. Really find ways to take time for yourself, whether it's a spa day, whether it's just putting your headphones on and not talking to anyone for an hour every day, whether it's exercise, which has also been really important for my mental health. Making sure that you're eating clean, because all of these things affect your mental health and your ability to cope. So those are my 2 cents. Really invest in yourself and in your health, because it will work wonders in a system. It's called the broken room, in a system that's rigged against you.
Thank you for sharing.
I would I would sort of emphasize what has been said, because you're absolutely right. It's self-care is really important. And what you tend to find with women is we care. And when we care, we actually give a lot of ourselves and forget and put everybody ahead of us apart from ourselves. And so, you know, taking time to actually have that moment and reflect, whether it's listening to music, whatever works for you, doing some mindful exercises, breathing exercises, you know, and recognize actually that you're not having a good day, and forgive yourself and saying, I'm not having a good day, but the sun will rise tomorrow, and it will always it will feel different. And so it's recognized when you're having not such a good day, and then you reach out for those networks and people you can talk to, and just sort of say, it's okay actually today that I'm not feeling great and I'm not on top of things, but tomorrow can really help. And I say this when I first I'm at that phase in my life where the menopause became a big thing, and then it affects your confidence and so forth. And rationally, I worked out what was happening to me before the doctors did, and luckily that I was working for a mental health trust, so I actually at the time, we did a lot of work on this, and that suddenly I recognized some of the things in myself, and I was able to get the right support, as opposed to be prescribed antidepressants. When I wasn't depressed, I was hormone deficient, and that really made the biggest difference. I'm a great advocate for listening to your body and finding ways in which you can support yourself and arm yourself with the right information so your health counts, but taking that time for yourself. And I said I do it by going to live music and various other bits with different people, family members, friends, and so forth, and that works for me. And I'd like to have a good laugh, and if I can laugh at the end of a day, however stressful it's been, I know it ends on a better day. So I always end with watching something funny on television, and I can recommend something silly like Miranda, because it is silly, funny. The Big Bang Theory, because it's a bit quirky, and I'm a little bit quirky myself. and various other bits. Whatever it works, because it doesn't require too much of my thinking, and it settles my brain down. Laughter often does that. So, you know, you can have laughter therapy as well. So even if you don't feel like it, if you start laughing, you begin to laugh all the time, whatever challenges that you face. But because you care, it makes you more at risk than somebody who doesn't. And I recognize I'm one of those people who naturally wants to fix things. And I've got to learn to say, hang on a minute, I need to be able to cope and have the strength at certain times. And that means looking after myself as too.
Louise.
Yeah, I agree with everything that everyone said, and I think particularly within that, to reinforce that emotional load can be high. So really setting those boundaries and ensuring that you are continuing to reflect on a regular basis and what's happening in your working week that brings you joy, and so that there's the well-being, but also what is it that really helps you and makes you feel that you are doing something that's fulfilling. So well-being, setting those boundaries, and bringing your authentic self and finding that group of people where you can be yourself is incredibly important.
Thank you so much. We've got 2 minutes. So what I'm going to ask all of you to do is just give a very short sentence, as short a sentence as you have ever created in your life, that captures a key message that you want to leave our audience and anybody else who will be watching the recording after. Good. Yeah, Sharon.
I'll be very quick. Don't give up, basically. Don't give up, because whatever happens in real life happens to real life people. It will soon pass. Right. So whether it's a positive thing or a negative thing, it will pass. But never give up. Never give up.
Thank you. Melanie, Louise?
Yep. You are capable, you are worthy, and you can do this.
Okay. Louise, you have the final word.
You've all got so much to give. There's great joy to come from mentoring, sponsoring, supporting others, as well as receiving it.
Thank you. Can we give a shout out to all our 3 guests? Use the reaction to just thank them for their time, for their authenticity, and for sharing their experience and insights with us. I do really wish that we could go on and on, but time has, finished. So we'd have to move on to other things in our lives. Thank you so much, Louise, Melanie, Sharon. So once again, thank you, everyone, and God bless.